Hello and welcome back to another episode of HB Engage. My name is Dwayne Andrew Kerr, your host today. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Emily Casey, founder of Water Health and self-professed medicine defector. How are you today, Emily?
I am great, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for sitting down with me and to have a chat about you and your career so far at the very tender age of 27. You were very interesting to us here at HVG because of kind of the route that you've taken in your current career. Very unorthodox, very niche, which is always great for people to actually see what other aspects of healthcare they can venture into that's maybe not on the normal beaten path that everyone takes. But first of all, let's bring it all the way back. So you decided to start off your studies at UNSW in medicine. How was that?
Look, it was awesome. I was sort of in the undergrad track. So I was fresh out of high school. I did take a gap year beforehand, but always wanted to be a doctor. So I was super excited about it. And, medicine is one of those things where you kind of go wherever you get in. And it was super exciting for me to make the move from Melbourne up to Sydney to one of Australia's best unis. And at the start, it was everything I sort of, thought I dreamed of. There were so many smart people and I was learning so many interesting and fascinating things. And, you get to help people, or that's the kind of the goal when you're in med school. You're not really helping yet. But it was really wonderful at the start.
And then you said it was really wonderful at the start. What happened after that?
I guess what we're sold on careers is never really the reality, right? I'd sort of grown up around a few medical people. My mom was a nurse, so I knew how hard and long, doctors and health professionals always worked and things like that. But when I got into med school, I sort of realized that, there was a lot of content, which was awesome, but it was almost like you're regurgitating a lot of content and just learning how to solve those problems, which is great, but there wasn't a whole lot of room for, I guess, creativity or operating outside the lines, and more specifically from the system side. I got really kind of disheartened as I was going on placements and seeing how things worked, that it's almost like you were pumping through people kind of at the quickest rate possible. And it wasn't that, deep helping people go back to the root of the cause and things like that. And just the way things were allocated and running with the system, it's almost like those problems in the system that were preventing people from getting help was sort of, really bugging me a little bit, the money and policy side. And then as well as I, saw each of the clinical specializations, I was like, is there anything here really that I want to do for the next 10 to 15 years of my life? All super interesting, and loved it. But I really liked, I guess, the variety side of things. So, was looking at emergency medicine and things like that, but I just couldn't quite find my place. So I started to, I guess, wonder if there was another path that might be for me. I did a heap of extracurricular things in uni, like all the student societies and medical student societies, and worked with partnerships and stuff there with big organizations. And that was really fun for me, just seeing how, I guess, business worked and, working with people in a different dynamic. So it's sort of put business as a maybe category. And then I guess the other thing that was, I guess, a unique-ish experience was I had a lot of medical issues in medical school. So accelerated learning, you could say, and got to experience firsthand the patient side, and was in and out of hospital a lot. Had 5 or 6 surgeries and probably about 6 months all up as an inpatient at different times. And that was really freaking hard. And I guess if, I was struggling that much and I had direct access to some of the best health professionals in the world, I kind of wondered, how other people did it and
Mm.
saw, really firsthand the problems in the system again. So I just wasn't sure that I wanted to be, in that clinical side or the clinical side for me at that stage in life, and took a step back.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think for especially a career like becoming a medical doctor, it's one of those ones where you have to kind of be sure to an extent that you want to do that, because it is such a long process to become fully quiet as an MD and start working in whatever stratosphere that may be, whether that's in hospital or as a GP. So time and money and all those sort of things like come together so you got to make sure that the decision you're making to go through with that is the one that you want.
That's it, right? It's such a big commitment. And I think it's also one of those things where you can think it's what you want, but the reality of something is never, mm, I guess, A, what we imagine it
Yeah.
to be, and then B, like, you just can't really know if that
Yeah,
is going to
true.
play out. You've got to experience things often, right?
Yeah, exact. I think experience is one of the main attributes in order to become successful in today's world, because we all go to school, we all go through uni, but it doesn't really prepare you for the life that and the world that's really out there. It's not until you actually get into the workforce and see things happening firsthand that you realize that the the version of what I depicted life to be outside of this is not what I thought. You know what I mean? And it really is about getting down at ground level and seeing things on a day-to-day basis. And then you can now understand how things work and what changes you can potentially make. And that could be in any industry, from health to technology and to fintech. It all pretty much stems from a solid foundation of understanding what's out there. But you mentioned that obviously going through med school, you realized that nothing within that realm of healthcare kind of sparked your interest and made you want to, I guess, carry on with that. And so can you touch on the start of, I guess, your startup experiences, and then kind of what was the driving force behind you and for you getting into startups?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I was 4 or 5 years in, and I didn't want to jump out of med totally, so took an internship in finance. Kind of random, but
Yeah.
gave me great experience in business and real business, not just what you study. And that was at Westpac, and Westpac
Okay.
had a venture capital arm called Reinventure, which basically invests in technology startups. And I liked finance. It was never going to be purely for me, but I got the pleasure of sitting in a few of those meetings with some startups, and I knew nothing about technology or anything, and just hearing these guys and the problems they were solving and how they were doing it was like, oh, this is really interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so from there, sort of asked around and learnt about a couple of the innovation hubs, one of which was called Stone and Chalk, ironically, that specialized in fintech at the time. And I ended up working there down the track, which is a bit of a come home moment. But from there, I guess I started going to a bunch of the Innovation Hub open days, a lot of the startup events, because there was just so many around in Sydney at the time. Um, and then took a bit of time off to travel. And once I came back, decided I wanted to try a few more things in startups. And so volunteered at this thing called StartCon, which was an awesome experience. I ended up with the role as like sort of speaker runner. So I got to like meet guests or speakers coming in and then hang with them and walk them to the stage for their presentations.
Yeah.
And at the time, I knew nothing about any of the companies or anything, but I got to, talk to big investors from Silicon Valley and Luca Nia, who is the CEO and founder of Safety Culture, which is one of Australia's, unicorns and stuff, and just meeting all these amazing people and learning about what they did, as well as, I guess, sort of the passion and culture behind it. I was like, damn, this industry really could be for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. Ironically, when you say that about, I guess, getting in from the ground level and doing small little jobs at these conferences, we were at a conference not that long ago, and we were pretty much having a few conversations about career insights and how you can get into certain industries, like I guess into regulatory affairs. And one of the advice that one of our recruitment specialists said was the industry is quite hard to get into. So sometimes something that may seem simple, as in volunteering at conferences, is such a good way to get in there, because through that you're going to meet so many people, and so many people at like executive levels and above, that will stead you in goodwill moving forward, because once they can put a face to the name, a lot of the time it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. So that's such a good way for people to get into certain industries, like what you've done yourself.
I couldn't agree more. And that's like such a beautiful example, right? Because from there, I guess I met a few people and like, uh, I guess networking isn't really that big in healthcare. It's a
Mm,
bit more about what uni you went to, and it is important, but not to the same level as I think a lot of career fields. But from there, I met someone at the venture fund Airtree. So went and signed up to their talent pool and took an internship at a HR tech company,
okay.
which is called Employment Hero, and they're also now a unicorn. So random. Like that was my first startup job, but to credit, like I just got in there and got to know people and did everything I could, took all these theoretically low level jobs, but networked, I guess, my way into most of my roles, to be honest, from there. It led to like, finding out about a program called She Starts, and I had my own early stage startup. And then it was purely based off, the networks and connections there that eventually led me to a job as community manager at Stern and Chalk, which was a completely people-based role. And I guess a really great entry point to the industry properly.
I love that. And it's so crazy the route that you've taken, which I'm assuming, based on previously with your experience in medicine as a student, leaving that, end up into startups, and then that led you to starting up your own venture called What the Health, which the name I love. Amazing. So can you give me a bit of a background about on that, and what exactly is it?
Yeah, for sure. So, What the Health is a newsletter and community all about tech and health tech and innovation, primarily focused on Australia, but now it does have a bit of an international audience, and we definitely tie in a heap of international themes. Um, and I suppose it stemmed from me seeing a problem in a weird, unconventional way. When I was at Stone and Chalk, my job was basically to help startups from all different industries get them what they need to, grow and scale and succeed. That was everything from corporate partnerships to helping them, tell their story and pitch to get investment from investors to, specific programs helping them with different elements. And so I spoke to a lot of founders regularly. And when COVID hit, a lot of health tech sort of became front and center, and it hadn't been that big in Australia. But I had a heap of health founders reaching out, asking questions about, how to get into hospitals, how healthcare industry worked, and, really basic commercialization things.
Yeah.
And they were years down the track. I was just like, how do you not know this? Have you not spoken to anyone in the industry?
Yeah.
That's really concerning.
Mm,
And then similarly, I kind of had a lot of, health professionals asking me about technology, and investors started to talk about health and health tech. And it just became really, really clear that there was sort of big gaps in knowledge as
yeah.
well as big gaps in connection in this industry, which is very classic of healthcare, super siloed, not a lot of things and pieces talking to each other.
Yes.
So I spent like a year then, leaning into the problem, learning as much as I could from Australia and abroad, and helping a few companies. And was like, oh, you know what? I love talking to people and like telling stories. Maybe I can turn this into a podcast or something like that.
Hmm.
And I was just, frustrated. And that's where the name came from. It was like, what the hell is going on? Basically, like,
Yeah.
seriously, how is this happening? And so I ended up starting a little newsletter when I was ironically recovering from a surgery and on leave from work, bringing together all the bits and pieces that I thought were kind of relevant in the industry, in, I guess, a fun, light-hearted way. Lots of memes and emojis, and didn't really think anyone would read. Um, there's definitely a few people reading now. I think we're just a
Just a
few.
few, just a few.
Yeah, we kind of quickly grew into the hundreds and started doing events just because I was talking to all these awesome people who were sort of looking for each other. That's where the community element came in. And now we're over 2,200 run like events
Amazing.
regularly in big cities, and have been really lucky enough to work with a heap of awesome, founders, experts, and investors in the space, and hoping to roll out a few more bits and pieces to help continue that mission.
Amazing. And why do you think there seems to be a lack of, I guess, information and connection within the health space? Because we've done a couple of other podcasts with medical researchers from the North Shore Hospital, and that seemed to be an issue with them as well, where they think one of the most important things moving forward within healthcare is that information between different areas is shared a lot more, because they do feel like it's quite siloed, and one part of healthcare doesn't have a clue about what other parts are doing. Why do you think that is, and what do you think is the best way to kind of combat that?
Whoa, what a giant question.
Yeah.
um, Look, I think it sort of comes down to the way that systems were designed, and also the culture is a really large part. Like, often in hospitals, I found and continue to find that, the department next door will use a totally different system and not even speak to the one here. And
Mm.
so if change departments, you can't get access to the same information and things like that. And that's kind of the way that healthcare has always been run. It's been a bit, setting up for each specific thing, and you do get funneled off very early into specific segments. And I think healthcare has also been so incredibly under resourced and stretched that there hasn't really been the time and investment to create the bridges and understanding, and also just basic infrastructure for that sharing. So now we've sort of gotten so far down this path, with lack of investment in that stuff, that now we're like, oh shit, there's all these hundreds, thousands of disconnected parts,
Yes,
and we
yes,
don't even
yes.
know where to begin. So I think it's a tricky one, and there's no single solution, but it comes back to, I guess, starting to invest in that education perspective for everyone to bring them on the journey, as well as providing some sort of, I don't know if it's sort of databases or just routes. They could be people, it could be technology to provide that bridge really
Yeah.
specifically. And that's kind of a tiny bit of what I guess I've started to do just through the form of media, right? And
Mhm.
events. But there's definitely needs to be way more across multiple areas to try and uplift and then bridge those gaps.
I completely agree. I completely agree with that, because from the standpoint that healthcare, and everyone within healthcare knows this, that it is a complete ecosystem, and what you do as a physiotherapist will have an effect on me as an orthopedic surgeon. You know what I mean? Everyone is aware of that, so it's there is a knowing that we all are one. But yeah, I guess it's the idea that we need to be aware of what one side of healthcare is doing, um so that I can then further do my job a lot better. And I think with social media and the access to information that we do have now, whether that's through LinkedIn, Instagram, podcasts like this, YouTube, whatever, I think the information and the willingness for people to learn, not just clinicians and people within healthcare, but even just the general public. I think that willingness to learn is definitely on the rise. Even for me personally, I find myself learning a lot more through social media when it comes to the healthcare industry, just because the information's out there, and with the way the algorithm works, it kind of just starts giving you random bits of information that you never knew about or searched for. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. That's it, right? That's so interesting to hear. I think COVID too, I'm not sure how you feel about this, but really accelerated that. It's just been like everyone was forced into learning a bit about and upskilling about healthcare.
Yeah.
But it's the first time that people have really, I guess, had that extreme pressure,
Mhm.
and that there's needed to be clear communication and upskilling, and it's not going to stop from here. There's huge trends in, general public sort of wanting to know that stuff. And so I think
Exactly.
healthcare needs to shift from like this paternalistic view to actually enabling people and empowering people too, and making sure that there isn't actually misinformation because that's
Exactly.
the most dangerous thing.
Ironically, I think it was the sense of fear that kind of pushed people to learn more. You know what I mean? That I guess if we use COVID for an example, whenever it was at its peak, they were bringing out information every day. Whereas normally we don't really hear much about what's happening in healthcare unless it's a crisis, which I think is needs to be fixed. You know what I mean?
That's so true. Hey, it's like that extreme fear and extreme personal relevancy.
Hmm.
But it's such a shame too, because I feel like you're right that we don't hear about it unless there's a crisis. But there's
Yeah,
been a crisis under our nose for kind of a decade or so at least, and it still hasn't really been addressed. So it's quite
yeah.
interesting.
Um, Talk to me about what's some of the exciting things that are happening in health tech at the moment that you're loving.
Ooh, there is so much. Health tech is really in its early days. I guess health is kind of the last industry in tech and innovation to really, hit the ground running. And we saw a huge uptick in investment and things coming out over the last year or two, which is great to see. But all change is slow.
Hmm.
I think I'm personally very excited about the push towards preventative health and sort of that empowerment element for people. And that's everything from, the increased capabilities of things like Apple to enable people to engage with their health stats, and then,
Yeah,
programs that help that from the preventative side. And even for people with, more chronic conditions, just these really basic technologies and programs, it's going to change heaps from, an affordability and accessibility perspective. And then you've got, some more sexy things like the AI that is helping read scans and sort of,
hmm,
address information at scale, because health data has always been super unorganized. And, we're starting to find ways to utilize that better to, both save time and things for professionals, but also improve accuracy of outcomes and things like that. But yeah, I think it's, for me personally, it's everything from the patient perspective that's most exciting, as
for
well as
sure.
some of the almost like going back to bio and looking at people's individual, makeups and things, and how drugs affect them or treatments can affect them. I think that
Exactly.
personalization is going to be huge.
I think the personalized aspect of healthcare is going to be so important, where people are starting to move away from the one size fits all route, because that doesn't obviously help. The personalized aspect is something that I think is so important, especially, and I understand where within the healthcare space it's quite difficult, because I feel like within the healthcare region, especially frontline workers, there's just so much going on, and a lot of the time there's not enough. So I think a very important part is kind of, I guess, tunnel vision a little bit on that, and trying to create a work environment where it is possible, where people can actually, or healthcare workers can actually delve a little bit deeper into each patient that comes into them, so they can, I guess, create a bespoke version of treatment for them.
Couldn't agree more. That's kind of it, right? It's like the one size fits all really doesn't apply to humans.
Yeah,
And so we've got a long way to go, but it'll be exciting if slash when we get to that point for everyone.
for sure. And in terms of, I guess you can say healthcare is slowly upskilling their industry with personalized care and preventative medicine or preventative treatment. And what are some of the things that you would say you've done in terms of upskilling to help get you to this point in your career?
Oh, um, from a like general perspective or health specific?
Could be general, could be healthcare specific.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I guess I put down a lot of my learning to self-driven learning in a weird way. I'm kind of one of those people that once I find something interesting, I'll go all in. But honestly, the biggest things for me have been speaking to people. So when I wasn't sure of what I wanted to do, and then when I got on this tangent, I messaged everyone on LinkedIn and gave them a really sort like just a reason, a background, and like, hey, this is what I want to talk to you about, and did a lot of, I guess, learning about things directly from people as well as good resources.
Yeah.
And then from there, I sort of, jumped on books and podcasts and online courses and just devoured as many as I could.
Hmm.
I also work in venture capital, so now on the investing side for startups. And I was always told that you needed a master's in finance or something to go and do that. And I think that helps, but it's not entirely true. I learned by just talking to hundreds of startups and investors and a lot of great online courses, like Techstars runs a free venture capital program, and a lot of the VCs and things are now rolling out programs too. So I was lucky enough to get into Airtree's Explorer program and
Hmm.
learned a whole lot that way. And it's kind of just, I get learning by doing and finding a lot of the right resources on the internet.
For sure. Learning by doing, find the resources and speaking to people, I guess, would be one of the those top three. But just to finish off, do you have three tips that you could potentially give to someone who's kind of thinking about taking somewhat of a similar route to you?
Three tips.
Or maybe
I
one?
would never recommend
I
anyone
wouldn't
go my
recommend doing my route.
no, that's terrible. I've had an awesome time. My route has been very
Yeah.
windy. And sometimes I think there's real beauty in that, right? Like now everything makes sense, but everything
Mhm.
can always only make sense when you're looking back on it,
Yeah.
never forward.
All in hindsight.
Yeah, these are going to be really cliche.
I like
I would say
cliches or cliches for a reason. Going ahead.
that's so true. That's so true. I think the first one is sort of just indulge your curiosity. Like, don't let anything hold you back. And if there's something that interests you, follow that. Um, my second thing would probably be find good people, and surround yourself by them, whether that's, online, even just on Twitter, or there's some really great online communities now, or going physically to events. Just seek it out. It's always going to be uncomfortable at first, but I think the people around you make the biggest difference in your mindset and opportunities, to your earlier point. Um, and then the third thing I'd say is just, you know, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Ooh, I like that one. That's my favorite.
It's the suckiest one, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And every day I still often feel like I'm gonna vomit over something. That sounds so dramatic and terrible, but it's like the only real indication you're sort of growing. And I've found as well that actually by leaning into that fear is where you will get the best outcomes that you're after.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. It's been super fun chatting.
Yeah, that was very, very fun. But just to finish off, could you just let people know where they can find you? So that could be your personal Instagram or LinkedIn, and then where they can find What the Health as well.
For sure. You can find me on LinkedIn under Emily Casey. Um, I should be linked to Side Stage Ventures or What the Health. And you can find out everything about What the Health at whatthehealth.io. It is a Substack newsletter, but there's also a heap of other resources and things you can find on the website.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening and to another episode of HBG Engage.